Let's take a look at this new SD45 release from ScaleTrains. Hi, I'm Dan Cortopassi, and today I'm reviewing an HO scale SD45 locomotive from ScaleTrains. My model is decorated for Denver and Rio Grande Western in the black and orange scheme with large billboard lettering. The model is part of the ScaleTrains rivet counter line. ScaleTrains offers these models in two versions. The factory direct price for the DCC ready version is $199.99. I paid $299.99 for my DCC and Sound Equip version direct from ScaleTrains. We'll start the model at 100 possible points. The locomotive is packed in a sturdy cardboard box lined with foam. Inside is an owner's manual with DCC and other information. A plastic cradle protects the model. There are truck protectors that need to be removed before running the model. Mine detached on their own. The handrails have foam protectors. This is a good box that should protect the model for storage and transport. I found some historical information on Rio Grande SD45s in Joseph Strapak's Rio Grande Diesels Volume 2, as well as in a couple other books I have on SP and Rio Grande motive power. Rio Grande purchased a total of 26 SD45 locomotives from EMD. The units came in two orders. The first 10 were delivered in 1967. A second order for 16 units was delivered in 1968. DRGW SD45 was from this later group. Most of these units were still in service when Rio Grande and Southern Pacific merged in the late 1980s. Southern Pacific Rail's, a motive power finale, lists 21 units with some gaps in the numbering. I'm assuming that some of the Rio Grande SD45s were off the roster before the mid-1990s. According to the information in the books I have, it looks like most of the Rio Grande SD45s were retired by 1996. It doesn't appear that any were assigned Union Pacific numbers in the 1996 merger. My unit, SD45, was retired in December 1995. Photos I found online show the unit in service as Dakota and Iowa 2801 in the early 2000s. I compared the model to photos I found online of the real SD45, and it appears to be a close match overall. As a modeler, one of the things I like about a lot of Rio Grande's diesels is that their appearance didn't change all that much over time. The real SD45 is no exception, and it looked very much the same for its entire service life on the Rio Grande. Even the vintage ACI labels were still there in photos I found from 1995. Having said that, there are a few small details that would need to be changed to update the engine. Photos suggest that Rio Grande switched to a different style of re-railing frog at some point. Most photos from 1980 and later show the SD45s equipped with a different type. The oscillating light on this unit may have been orange when delivered, as it is on the model. In other photos of SD45, it was painted silver at one point and then black. Photos I found show that sometime between 1977 and 1981, SD45 got a different air horn. The one on the model looks like a good match for the horn from 1977. By 1981, the pilots on the real unit had more modern uncoupling levers. All of these would be relatively easy things to change. Since I primarily modeled the 1990s, I'll likely make these changes to my model eventually. The paint on the model is opaque and thin enough not to obscure detail. All of the markings are crisp. There are voids in the large Rio Grande lettering on the sides at panel seams where there would be gaps in the real thing too. There aren't a lot of small stencils on this model, but the ones that are there are legible with magnification. The model has a nicely done rear-mounted brake wheel, sunshades, and mirrors. The handrails are made of a flexible plastic that should stand up to normal handling. Unfortunately, a lot of the stanchions are crooked. The SP SD45Rs from ScaleTrains that I reviewed some time ago had this same issue. I think this mars the appearance of an otherwise outstanding model, so I'm taking 5 points. Thankfully, the shorter plastic handrails on the ends of the model don't seem to have this issue. On the cab, the model has separately applied windshield wipers and freestanding grab irons. The cab windows slide open and closed. Sometimes they tend to move around on their own, so it can be difficult to keep them in a fixed position without some glue. It can be a little hard to see, but the cab has a full interior. I like the number boards, which are made to look like the numbers are behind glass. The drop steps look like they should be able to be put in the upright position, but they seem fragile, so I'm not going to try it. The front pilot has an uncoupling lever, hoses, and a plow. The corner steps are see-through. In back, the model also has freestanding grab irons. The rear pilot is similar to the front, minus the plow. On top of the cab, the model has a horn and an antenna. The dynamic brake and radiator fans have see-through grills. I found one roof shot of SD45 and the grills look correct. A different photo from 1990 shows two of the radiator fans with pan-top grills. These could sometimes be changed out when the locomotive was in the shop. In that same photo, the dynamic brake vent is painted orange. Underneath, the model has plenty of detail. The sander lines can hit the truck side frames when the trucks pivot. They're flexible enough that I don't think this would cause any operational issues. Unlike my SD45s from previous runs, the wheel faces on this model are painted. All the wheels pick up current and all the axles are powered. The locomotive has ScaleTrains body-mounted knuckle couplers on both ends. The front coupler is low, so I'm taking 5 points. The rear coupler is also low. All of the wheels are in gauge according to the NMRA standards gauge. There is no significant body wobble. The model weighs 19.9 ounces. Drawbar pull peaked at 4.2 ounces on my force gauge. For comparison, the SP SD45Rs that I previously reviewed topped out about 3.5 ounces, so this engine is a little stronger. F8 turns on the sound as well as the number boards, walkway lights, and ground lights. F0 turns on the headlights, which are directional. The forward headlight comes on when the locomotive is set to move forward, and the rear headlight comes on when the locomotive is set in reverse. F5 cycles the class lights. They can be white, green, or red. F7 turns on the oscillating light, which is also directional. F2 sounds the horn. The length of the toot depends on how long the F2 key is pressed. The engine starts and stops smoothly. It could probably be even smoother with some tweaking of the motor control CVs. F1 rings the bell. F4 turns on the dynamic brake sounds. Sound drive hold feature set up on the F9 key. This allows the throttle to control the prime mover sound without changing the locomotive's speed. This can be used to simulate a heavy train starting out with the engine revving, or a locomotive that is coasting. F10 is the independent brake. The momentum settings in the decoder will determine how quickly the engine will stop and start again. The locomotive has no issues on Kato 550mm curves, which are equivalent to a 21 5/8 inch radius. With the sound off, the driveline is quiet. The model's dynamic brake section is removable, so be sure not to pick up the model by this part. The decoder is right on top. If you had the DCC Ready version and wanted to install a 21-pin decoder, this would be the easiest way to do it. Be careful of the white wire, which has a lot of slack and could easily get snagged. If you want to remove the shell, first remove the draft gear boxes. Now the body can be separated from the chassis. The shell on my model was very tight. Removing the shell is another way to access the light board and decoder. Be careful when putting the shell back on. This little piece fell off my engine and it took me a while to figure out what it was. It's one of the frame cross pieces behind the jacking pad. These are actually glued onto the chassis and are easily dislodged. Since it's all but invisible, I'm not going to put it back on. Is there such a thing as too much detail under the sill? I prefer KD couplers, so I'm going to swap the couplers and fix the coupler height at the same time. After removing the stock coupler and spring, KD158 whisker couplers fit perfectly in the draft gear boxes. Unfortunately, they're still low. As with most of the ScaleTrains diesels that I've reviewed, to raise the couplers I'll need to file the coupler mounting pads and the tops of the draft gear boxes. It took some trial and error, but I got both couplers to the correct height. So as I mentioned in the review, one of the things I like as a modeler is that the overall appearance of the Rio Grande diesels didn't change that much over the era that I'm interested in. The SD45s in particular look pretty much the same through the 70s, 80s, and into the 90s. That makes it a little easier as a modeler, because if you're modeling like what I usually do, the SP for example, in the late 80s they started to delete the oscillating lights and the emergency lights, and then in the early 90s a lot of them got repainted into speed lettering, so the appearance of the engines is a little more specific to a specific time, whereas with Rio Grande you can get away with a little bit more leeway, so that's kind of cool as a modeler to be able to do that. Also, since the Rio Grande and SP were merged in the era that I model, basically the early to mid 90s, It's a good excuse for me to be able to run some Rio Grande power on the layout, so I'm looking forward to adding this engine to my fleet. Let's see what we've got. The handrails have crooked stanchions, so I took 5 points in the paint and detail category. Both couplers were low, so I took 10 points in the standards and operation category. That leaves us with 85 out of 100 possible points, which earns a B. This is a nice model and it deserves a green signal. I think ScaleTrains did a really nice job on this model. If you're looking for some Rio Grande power for your HO scale layout, then I think you might like it. If you like this video, then please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned and thanks for watching.